Hi everyone. In this session, we'll see about a JavaScript variable scope. Okay. So what is meant by scope here? A scope defined based on the declaration position of a variable in your JavaScript code. A scope defines the declaration position of a variable in the JavaScript code. Let us see the types of JavaScript variable scopes. Types are three types. First one is global scope. Second one is local scope. It can be called as a functional scope, as well as next one is the block scope. Block scope. Okay, we'll see one by one. Okay, so let me go to the code. In the last session, we have created a external JavaScript file. So in this index.html, we refer that external JavaScript file by using the script tag with src attribute. Okay, so in this session, we'll define about a scope. So let me browse this page. My page is ready. Okay, so what is meant by global scope? Next, we'll see about local scope. Next one is block scope. Local scope and then block scope. Okay, so which is my JavaScript file? Okay, so JavaScript is the file which contains only the variables and functions. Let me create a variable var or either let anything can you able to use, but which one to use we have discussed in the earlier session. You can able to go through the previous videos. Okay, where first name is equal to the variable name should be a camel case is equal to, let me give some name, this now. Okay, next, so if you defined any variable like this, it can be come under global scope. If you define any variable like this, it can come under global scope. If you define a variable inside of your JavaScript function, for example, let me create one more variable. First name, last name. Simply let me give as v. Okay, so let me create a function. Full name a comma b, or else you can able to declare as a first name comma last name. So to distribute these variables, right, instead of give like this, let me give a comma b. Okay, return a plus b, so which is nothing but a concatenation operation. So let me add some space. A is the first name. Next, I want to add some space, and then b is the last name. Let me call this function. Can I print? Yes. Document dot write first name, last name, which is done by using this full name function. Okay, so let me see the output. Okay, here I need to pass a parameters. What is the parameters here? My parameter is first name, comma, last name. Let me see the output. Please now. Okay, now I will explain. So here you have declared the two variables, first name and then last name. So which are nothing but your global scope. The variables which are defined at a global level to a function, global level to your JavaScript page, or else outside of function is nothing but a global variables. Global variables are nothing but the variables which are defined outside of a function at a global to the page is nothing but a global scope variables. Next, what is meant by functional scope? If I define a variables here, my a comma b, these two are defined inside of a function or argument of function. These are nothing but a functional scope. These two variables are nothing but a functional scope. So if any variable, if I declare inside of this function also nothing but a functional scope variable. So in this case, let me define like this. Let or var any variable I can use, var name is equal to. So instead of writing this the black code, can I do to above? Yes. Here let me go. Next, return name. So if I define a variable inside of a function is nothing but a local. So here the name is a local variable and its scope is the functional scope. You can able to simply call as a functional scope or a local scope variable. Name and a and b, all these variables are defined inside of a function which are having the scope of functional scope. Okay, if I define a variable outside of a function and the global to that file is nothing but a global scope. Okay, so let me take the notes. Global scope. Define the variables outside of function and global to that JS file is a global scope variable. You can able to are a global scope variables. Next. So what is meant by local scope or a functional scope? If I define a variables inside of a function is nothing but a your local or a functional scope. Define the variables inside of a function. So the variable can be arguments or variables. Okay, define the variables inside of a function. So that can be arguments or variables. See here, in this situation, a comma b are the arguments which are having the scope of functional scope, and the name also having the functional scope. Okay, inside a function or functional scope variables. Okay, so somebody will say local scope this way also. I will give the one more case. For example, let me go here, save this file. Let us debug. How to debug? Go to the browser, inspect a page. This is the way we need to debug. Go to the console, source. So here I'm having my common.js file. Put a debugger here. Put a debugger inside a function as well as. So let me refresh this page. So it will refresh with the latest code. So my latest code is, see here, F10 plus F10 to go to the next step. Function first name my Krishna, last name is Davi. Next, your function will be executed from here. See here, the scope of the variable is the local. Let me check it. First name Krishna. Next name we have defined, right? Name. Okay, so which are having the name. Now you can able to access the name. Once let me go outside and check it. Can you able to access? No, we can't able to access. We can't able to access this name variable once this function scope is ended. So my function is here. Let me check name. You can't able to get the value. Why? Because the scope of a name is local to that function. Next, let me access the first name. Yes, you can able to access the first name because which are in a functional scope? No, which are in a global scope. The global scope variable you can able to access outside and inside of the function as well as. Functional or a local scope variable you can able to access within the function. Okay, once the execution function is completed, you can't able to access. Okay, next scenario. We'll see next scenario. Here in this function I have defined a name. Yes, let me change to full name. Let me change to full name. So this is the function in a camera case. This is all are smaller case. Let me save this one. Refresh this page. So in this situation, I have not defined your variable with any keyword. Can I declare it with a var? No. Can I declare it with a let? No. So in this situation, we'll see about how your local and global variable work. Okay. Let me check. First name Krishna is there, and full name. So see here. So this full name I'm not able to access. Okay. So let me try the case. F10, F10. Now let me check full name Krishnavi. Okay. So let me go outside of the function. Now let us check full name is Krishnavi. First name is Krishna. Why so? In a JavaScript, all the variables are dynamically typed variables. You can declare the variable without let and var and constant keyword also. This is the way we can able to declare the variables like this also. If you declare the variables like this, these variables behaves as a global scope variables. These variables behaves as a global scope variable. Inside of a function, you can able to declare the variable. So inside a function, without a declaration, if you assign some data to a variable, that variable will behave as a global level variable. Okay, let us take that one. Global scope variables can be accessed inside and outside of a function as well. Inside and outside of function as well. Next, with inside of a function, assign the value to a variable, without declaration. This variable will behaves as a also behaves as a global variable. So this type of the variable only possible in JavaScript. In other language, it's not possible without declaration, only assignment. So what is meant by declaration? What is meant by it? So here, if you define a variable, this is nothing but a declaration, and this is nothing but a assigning the variable data. Okay, this is nothing but a declaration. Here is nothing but assignment. So what happened in this case? No declaration, directly assignment. If you define like this, right? So this variable, the full name, you can able to access outside of here also. We able to access? Yes, we have already seen that one. See here, still I can able to access the full name because which is not declared but able to assign, which is the case only possible in JavaScript. This is the case which is possible only in the JavaScript. Inside of a function, assign the value to a variable without declaration. So this is nothing but a global scope. Okay. Local scope variables are not accessed by using accessed out of function. So nothing but a local scope variables will access within the function only. Okay, next we'll see about a black scope. What is meant by black scope? See here. So sometimes we are going to write a looping conditions. Yes, I want to print some data function print. So in this situation, I want to create some for loop for let I is equal to 0, I less than 10, I plus plus. So this I can able to declare in a two ways. Either I can able to declare let I is equal to 0 here. Simply let I equal to 0 here. Let I can able to declare here as well as and here as well. If I define let I in the line number 16, this will be become a functional scope. If I declare the variable inside of your for loop, nothing but a where or let anything you can use. This is nothing but a local scope. If you declare the variables inside of a any scope of a black scope is nothing but a black scope variable. See here. Now this let I having the scope is the black scope. Okay. Black scope is nothing but a define the variables inside of a some code block is a code block is a black scope. Black scope variable. For example, take this as example. With this is a both these are having a global scope. This full name also having the global scope. This I having the black scope. Okay. Let us see the simple difference. Global scope, local scope, black scope. What is meant by global scope? Declaring the variable outside of a function in JavaScript. Local scope is nothing but a declaring the variables inside of a function is nothing but a inside of a function in a JavaScript is nothing but a your local scope. Black scope is nothing but a black scope declaring a variable, declaring the variables in the specific code block. In this specific code block is nothing but a black scope. Next, global scope variables can be accessed anywhere in the same JS file. Function or local scope, functional or local scope variables will be accessed within the function, within the same function. Black scope variables will be accessed within the same block. Okay, so there is a one special case in a black scope. What is that special case? So black scope, sorry, what is the special case in a global scope? If you declare the variables outside and if you declare without declaration, if you assign some data, that variable also become a global scope. In a function, assign data to a variable without declaration. is nothing but a global scope variable. So this is only happen in the global scope. Here no, here. Okay, this is the example. Which one is the example? Okay. So that's it for global, local, and black scope variables.